This is my constant message, is that when you're living in times, magnificent times like we're blessed to live, it just can't be business as usual. We have to wake up every day, and every person has to ask themselves, what can I do for Israel, the Jewish people, and God today? And I think if all of us do that collectively, hopefully that can take us over the finish line from the messianic times that we're living in and bring us to the time of the final redemption.
Hi, and welcome to the Dayna Show, where we discuss in English day-to-day life of Israeli citizens, our concerns and aspirations for the country, and everything in between. I'm your host, Dayna Kaplan, and we're so glad that you could join us. Before I start the podcast, I usually mention the hostages.
Sure.
And I say that, even though we go on with our daily lives, they're always in our minds.
Absolutely.
And I'd also, because we've gone into Gaza, the soldiers have gone into Gaza in the last few days, I just want to, send my thoughts to the soldiers, our prayers to the soldiers who are protecting us, and hope they come home safely, and thank you. On that note.
Absolutely.
On that note, if you would allow me, I'd like to start off with Parshat HaShavua.
Great.
Okay, small littles of our Torah.
Great.
In Parshat Vayakel, that's coming up right now, it talks about how Moshe assembled Bnei Israel to come to hear the instructions on building the Mishkan. And Chazal say that nobody was forced to do it, they all came willingly. And what I take from that is that instinctually the Jews knew that there's no Am Yisrael without Torah, without spirituality, and there's no Am Yisrael without spirituality and Eretz Yisrael. You are a perfect example of that, from someone who made Aliyah, a Rav making Aliyah from the United States, come here, and you go right into the nucleus of the country by being a minister in the Knesset. You've done wonderful things for the country in terms of Jewish advocacy, and you are also the CEO of an amazing organization called Yad L'Olim. You're an author as well. I want to thank you so much for coming. It's a real honor for me to have you. Thank you, Rabbi Dov Lipman, for coming.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here with you.
Yeah, it's a real honor for me. Even though I am an Olah myself, that I've made Aliyah myself, I still am so appreciative for people to come here, and I recognize the difficulty, the struggle of coming here. There's a bitui in the Pirkei Avot, lefum tzara agra, right?
Yep.
So the effort should match the effort that you make to move here matches the reward.
Sure.
So I feel like a special kinship to people who make Aliyah because I appreciate the hard work and the sacrifice it takes to move here.
One of the things that I tell everyone, and I'm a very big advocate for Aliyah, obviously, and go around the world and talk about it, but I don't tell anybody that it's going to be easy. I don't tell anyone that they can just imagine there'll be just some simple, great, smooth process. It's actually just the opposite. And the Gemara even says, the Talmud even says that one of the things that are acquired with suffering, that's a very strong terminology, is the land of Israel. And anyone who makes Aliyah has to know during the process, after arriving, even 10, 15, 20 years later, there's a lot of challenges involved. You do it because you believe in it. You do it because you believe this is where a Jew is supposed to live, not because you somehow think that life will be easier, but specifically because life isn't easier. I think that makes it much more meaningful.
100%. And I know that from experience, is that when I was brought up in a very Zionist household, it was natural for me to come here, but it was very, very challenging. And I came here before there was internet, before there was anything. I reap the rewards. Even though life is difficult here, I reap the rewards. And I don't condemn anyone who doesn't want to make Aliyah. But on the other hand, like I said, we have this triad, right? With Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael and the Torah. And your life isn't complete as a Jew unless you fulfill all those three things.
Absolutely. I was just talking with my wife yesterday about there's actually a legitimate opinion in the Midrash, not some extreme view that says that the fulfillment of Torah and mitzvot outside of the land of Israel is only practice for one to be prepared when they arrive in the land of Israel. That's earth-shattering when you think about how integral living in the land of Israel is to the Jewish people. And that's why when I travel around, I don't criticize people who don't make Aliyah, but I am critical of a society where Aliyah is not on the radar screen. In other words, if someone looked into it, they checked into it, financially it doesn't work, career-wise it doesn't work, there's family issues, I get it. And there are many reasons why a person can then choose to not live in Israel. But to have not gone through that process, for not to be on the radar screen, for people not to be raising their children one day to go live in Israel, because that's what Jews should do, that's where I can be critical. I often talk about it in terms of, so I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish day school system, and of course they taught us about tzitzit. For the boys, we wear tzitzit. There's no commandment that says that I have to wear tzitzit. We fulfill it when we wear a four-cornered garment and we wear the tzitzit. At the baseline, Israel is that. In other words, the Ramban actually says that it's an absolute Torah-level obligation for every Jew to move to Israel. Not all the commentaries agree. They say you fulfill a biblical commandment when you move here. So at least let it be on that level of discussion where it's on the table and it's something which people are encouraged to look into. And if at the end of the day a person can't make it, okay. So they choose begrudgingly, hopefully, to live outside the land of Israel. But that it should be brought back to the fore as an essential to Judaism. That's really what I'm trying to advocate for.
Why do you think it isn't?
So there's a few things. First of all, I've spoken to rabbis and teachers about it. It's a little bit uncomfortable for a rabbi who's living in America, let's say, or in Canada, or in England, or in South Africa, to be preaching Aliyah to their congregants. It's difficult for a teacher in a Jewish day school to say, just like young men, you have to be wearing your tzitzit, you should be moving to Israel, but I'm not. So there's a little bit of a complication there. I say, let's put it all on the table. Again, explain it. Tell people why you aren't living in Israel, but don't shy away from it. That's the biggest reason. The second issue, and it's comfortable outside of Israel. It is. It's comfortable life, and that impacts the way people think about things. I ask myself, how did I used to sit in synagogue when we read the book of Devarim, the last book of the 5 books of Moses? Moses, on his own, mentions living in Israel as the ideal for a Jew over 50 times. What did I say to myself every Shabbat when I sat there hearing it? It just kind of like went in one ear and out the other. I didn't process this at all. And I think that the comfort of living as a Jew outside of Israel plays a role in that, because it somehow enables a person to push it out of the mindset a little bit.
I don't know why lately, I guess maybe since the war started, I started to think a lot about living in Chutz La'aretz and how people can live there without having the feeling of moving to Israel. And I noticed that when you live here, you're living a very authentic life.
Yeah.
You know, that like your identity as a Jew and all of those things are really, they come together there. And when I go back and I visit in Chutz La'aretz, I'm surprised that people feel that that's their home.
Right.
And I feel bad for them almost that they're missing that integral piece in their life.
It's such an important point. And I want to be clear, because there's a lot of Jews out there who are sad, and it does bother them, and it does hurt them, but not living in Israel. So I don't want to sort of paint this as this broad picture. But what you're saying is very true. I don't think people realize the degree of meaning that there is in living here. The reason why we have polls over and over again, happy meter polls of where are people happy, and it's always the top 5 are 4 Scandinavian countries and Israel. And you ask, how can that be? War, terrorism, political turmoil. It's not the easiest place to live financially. No. How is it possible? And it's because people find meaning in living here, and it's across the spectrum, religious and quote-unquote secular. People feel like they're part of the story of the Jewish people. And that feeds your everyday life with unbelievable meaning. The Khatam Sofer said that a carpenter in Israel, just by waking up in the morning and hammering that nail, is playing a part in the Jewish future and is fulfilling a Torah commandment by doing so, everything is more meaningful when you feel like you're part of the ultimate destiny and story of the Jewish people.
100%, I agree 100%. Everything that is missing there in terms of spirituality is here. Right. And the materialistic aspect you find there. For sure, there's we every day, a lot of people don't realize it, but every day in morning prayers we have the Birchat Kohanim, we have the Kohanim, the priestly blessings here in Israel, and we don't have that outside of Israel daily. And the question is why? Why? It's not a commandment that's bound to the land at all, but the reason is because that blessing is only supposed to be conveyed through joy, both for the priests, the Kohanim, and the Kahal, and for the people that are praying in the audience and in the synagogue. And in Israel, there's an assumption that on a daily basis, there is that joy, which is, like you said, it's not a materialistic joy, but it's a spiritual joy. And outside of Israel, you just don't have that. So we do it on the holidays, when the holiday infuses the day with more spirituality and greater happiness. That daily reminder of the spiritual joy that we have living here is something which I believe, certainly for me, keeps me going. It really pushes me and drives me, even when there are challenging times, and there are plenty of them. It's one of these like pinch me moments of, oh my goodness, I'm blessed to live in the land of Israel. What would my ancestors have given up for the opportunity to have 5 minutes here? And I'm blessed to have my life here, and I don't take it for granted. I am really happy that you said that, and I feel exactly the same way. The podcast is about amazing people doing amazing things in this country. And I'm more interested, even though I want to talk about all of your endeavors and the different programs, I'm more interested in you and what makes you the person you are. And I think a good place to start is where you were born, a little bit of your background. What was your impetus for moving to Israel, and your experience? Well, we can get into different aspects of your experience, but let's start from the beginning. Sure. So I was born in Washington, D.C., in George Washington University Hospital. Grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, in a wonderful, wonderful family, wonderful parents, 3 sisters. Went to great schools, just lived in a great community in Woodside in Silver Spring, Maryland. Was it Orthodox education? Orthodox education. Okay. My parents are actually the products of 2 very different worlds. My father of Balei Tshuva, people who returned to be religious in the United States, and my mother, child of Holocaust survivors from very fervently Orthodox homes, Borough Park and Florida kind of coming together and creating a really remarkable family. My father, Zechron Livracha, was a major, major influence on my life. He passed away 20 years ago. He was a federal judge. He was a leader in the community, president of the synagogue, president of the local school, involved in everything, community. Also, an incredibly dedicated father, despite his busy schedule. Any time he was in town and my high school team was playing basketball, he was there. Wow. He was there. He was there for us. He took us out to special outings. Just a really, really amazing father. But I saw how you can be both a professional on the highest of levels, community member on the highest of levels, and also family on the highest of levels. So he really modeled all of that for me, and I really think that that's a big part of who I am today. We grew up supportive of Israel, Rah Israel and Yom Ha'atzmaut and the like, but no one really talked very much about Aliyah. And I came to Israel after high school for 2 years. It did have an impact on me. I was here during the Gulf War. Me too. So you remember the gas masks, the sealed rooms in Talpiot in Jerusalem, in Yeshiva. Me too. I was in Michlala. Okay, so we could see Michlala across the way from Merkaz HaTorah. And we were neighbors. And I think that had an impact on me because it was the first time in my life that I was targeted because I'm Jewish, targeted because I'm in Israel. Thank God my parents let me stay here during the war, so I experienced the sirens and the gas masks and the sealed rooms. So that had an impact somewhere. I didn't realize it then, but I think I felt like I was connected to something on a deeper level than I realized. Went back to Maryland to Ner Israel Rabbinical College and Johns Hopkins. Is a program we do both at the same time. And settled in America, started a family, settled in America, teaching as my trade. And in
November 2003, the school where I was teaching, the Berman Hebrew Academy, went on a school mission to Israel. And they had staff come along as chaperones. And during that trip, my soul, something was pulling at me on the deepest of levels. Everywhere I went, just felt this pull and this emotion. And all of a sudden I said to myself, what am I doing raising my family in America when I have the opportunity to raise them in Israel? I was all of a sudden seeing Israel through the light of a parent in a very different place. And that was the impetus to coming to Israel. I believe in responsible aliyah, so I was the Israel guidance counselor at the school where I was teaching.
Oh, wow.
So every time a yeshiva or seminary representative came, I closed the door of my office and I said, are you doing any hiring? Because I wanted to come with parnasa, with a job in hand. And thank God I found a job teaching here and ended up teaching in a number of yeshivot and seminaries. But two moments, which I need to tell you just in terms of that aliyah process. One was, so I was offered the job and I had to think about, am I going to move or not? And my father at the time was sick. My father had cancer and he was going through a very rough time. And I actually had a dream one night. I'm not a big dreamer. I don't remember my dreams. And I was walking down some street and some very grotesque looking people were pointing at me and saying, how can you do this to your father? How can you do this to your father? And I woke up and I said, oh my goodness, I don't want to leave my father when he's ill. So my father asked me what's happening with Aliyah and the job. And I said, Daddy, I can't leave you. You're sick. And he said to me, don't do that. He said, if you have a dream and it'll make you happy to live in Israel, it'll cause me pain if you don't follow your dream. What a parenting moment where he freed me from the shackles of my guilt. And that was step one. And we just decided we're going to move to Israel. But then I had to call my grandmother and tell her that we're moving to Israel. And everybody who's made Aliyah, especially who's blessed to have grandparents or a grandmother they're close to, understands this tension of making this phone call. My grandmother, blessed memory, was a Holocaust survivor. Here she was in the golden years of her life, enjoying her grandchildren, great-grandchildren. She lived to see great-great-grandchildren.
Wow.
And she lived in New York. We were in Maryland, and we saw her often. I had to tell her that I'm making Aliyah. I was so afraid to make this phone call. Finally, I just picked up the phone, and I said, Bubby, I have some news for you. God willing, this summer we're making Aliyah, moving to Israel. And I braced myself for what I somewhat jokingly call the wrath of Bubby. I mean, she had no political correctness. I would say there was a pause after I shared the news. And then my grandmother said, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, shehachiyanu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman
Wow, the
hazeh.
chills, wow.
She gave thanks to God for keeping her alive and bringing her to this day, that she gets to see her grandchildren and great-grandchildren settling in the land of Israel. And that was a big moment for me, because whenever there were challenges along the way towards getting to Israel, settling in Israel, I heard that blessing in my head. I heard her voice, and how much it meant to her to know that we were going to be settling in Israel.
Oh, and that you had that blessing to be here.
Exactly. Not everybody has that experience.
No.
Certainly my work with Olim, I know a lot of people who their families are against it, and there's a lot of guilt, and it's very difficult. I was very blessed that I came here with the blessing of family, and that really made a very big difference.
How was it like for your children?
It's a great question. My children were 7, 4, 3, and 6 weeks old. Okay. So very different experiences for all of them.
Did you move straight to Yerushalayim?
To Beit Shemesh.
To Beit Shemesh. Okay.
And I do remember my son, who's now, he's gone through commander in Golani, and he's obviously been serving a lot in the reserves this past year, and is, thank God, married with 2 children living in Ramat Beit Shemesh. I remember the first day of school. So he's going into 2nd grade. He came home, and I said, how was school? And he said, I don't really know, because I didn't understand a word that anybody said today.
Yeah.
And it turned out that for a week or so, he was in the wrong classroom, and lots of growing pains.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget the moment that he turned to me, because we used to travel back to America often, both for summer camp and to visit family. The moment that he said to me, Abba, thank you so much for making Aliyah, because he said, I don't know that I would have been able to do it if I was living in America, but I'm so happy that we're here. That was a very big moment, because you have young children, you don't know how is Israel going to be for them. Each one of them went through their own challenges, but thank God 3 are married with children, and all committed towards serving the country and being involved in the country, and have tremendous passion for Israel. And it's wonderful to see that. But I will never look at anyone and say it wasn't difficult, that it wasn't challenging. sending your children to school and you don't speak the language, you don't have the culture, getting involved in PTA here is not the same as it is in America. Trying to understand how the Bagrut system works and getting your children through that, and then through Army, and it's very challenging to parent when you haven't experienced yourself what they're going through. But with all the challenges and all the ups and downs along the way, to look back 20 years later and to be able to see, where they are, ages 27 through 20, thank God, each one of them in their own path, that's been a real blessing.
I look at, I also have a similar story where I have grandparents who were Holocaust survivors as well, who moved after the war to Canada, and their life was also very, very challenging, getting acclimated to a new culture. So that's what I look at. My role is that for me, I came without children. I came pregnant with my first child. For me, the cultural difference, the adaptation was difficult, but for my children, it will already be ingrained in them.
Exactly. It's almost the people who make Aliyah are making the sacrifice.
Exactly. We're the chalutzim.
The chalutzim. And there is chalutzim 100% in what we're doing. And the Maharal says, he's a commentator in the 18th century in Europe, and he says then he said, anybody who moves to Israel, he says it's crazy. It goes against all nature. And he says it's from the DNA from Abraham to just pick up and leave your place of comfort and your family and go to, even if we know where we're going to today, it's still a foreign land, it's a strange land, it's a different place. And he says it's just built into the DNA of the Jew to do it.
Do you know the first pasuk of Lech Lecha by heart?
I do.
Yeah?
I believe I do.
Is that a stupid question?
No, it's not.
Because in my school in Eitz Chaim, we had to memorize Lech Lecha, you go, Me'artzecha, from your land, Mimoladecha, from your birthplace,
Beit
Avicha, El Haaretz, to the land, Asher Areka, which I show you. We had, that was the first pasuk that I knew off by heart.
Wow, that's an amazing statement there in terms of the education that you received. Because for most, it's not that way.
No.
It's really not taught that way. So that's really wonderful, that admirable to whoever the teachers are.
I hope you don't mind I brought it up.
No, I think it's a wonderful thing that they taught it that way. But my grandmother, who I mentioned in her blessing, she found the strength to come to Israel, and she visited me when I was a member of Knesset, in my Knesset office, about 70 years after her liberation from Auschwitz.
Wow.
And she's sitting there and she says, Dovela, this doesn't make any sense. A Jewish state, Israel, Jewish capital, Yerushalayim, Jewish parliament, Knesset, my grandson as a member, it doesn't make, she's right. We live in an incredible time where we have this opportunity in front of us, and I wish more children would learn that pasuk as their first pasuk, because I think it would have a tremendous impact. But so I applaud, everyone who made the trek and makes it. And again, now that I can talk about it from my own personal experience, I think it's very helpful to be an advocate, and definitely went through lots of ups and downs along the way. But definitely the best decision I ever made.
But don't forget, it's such a young country.
Yeah.
Like when I moved here, like I said, there was no internet. There was, most of the roads were just one lane each. Right. It was a completely different. And I look back, it's only been 30 years, and look how far we've come. 100. When people complain about how difficult it is, I'm like, you don't even know how difficult it was. Like, this is already like utopia.
For sure. And the question that I often get the questions about the wars and the political turmoil, and I say, this country is 76 years old. That's baby steps in historic terms. We're in the infant stages, so we're working through a lot of things. What does it mean to be a Jewish, democratic state in a country surrounded on all sides by enemies that want to destroy us? And thank God we've been able to fend that off. But there's a lot of complexity, but that's part of the excitement. That's part of the incredible process that we're blessed to be part of.
Yeah, and listen, we are a country full of Jewish people.
Right.
Like, you're not going to have one unified opinion about anything. Right. But that's part of the beauty.
Right.
That's part of who we are. We argue, and from that we get results.
Right. I'll never forget when because what brought me into politics was actually the struggles we had in Beit Shemesh on religious level.
Yeah, talk about that. I want to get into that.
So it was a few years in the makings, but basically some extremist elements moved to Beit Shemesh, which was a very open town, and even had a Haredi neighborhood that was very accepted. Everyone understood that we're living in the city together. And then these extremists came. There's a long story behind it I won't get into, but they made life very, very difficult. And at first, I was stunned by it. I'm this American. Can't we all just get along? I don't, live and let live. And what's going on over here? And I actually met with a very prominent rabbi who told me that it's built into who we are as a people that we have these disagreements. He even said to me, just to give a parable, he said when the Jews went through the Red Sea, so there was a different path for every tribe. Which, by the way, sets out to begin with that we have different tribes, there's different approaches, everyone can find their way. But he said, according to our sages, there were walls between each of those paths, but they were see-through. He said, why would they see through? He said, because otherwise the tribe of Reuven would say, we went through, but Shimon, they're not getting through. Yisachar would say, we're getting through, but Naphtali's not getting. Everyone had to see that everyone's getting through, that God has a place for everyone. So it's kind of built into our system to have this antagonism, and we have to learn how to work it out. So in Beit Shemesh, I tried the sit down and kumbaya and let's sing some songs together.
What was your position at the time when you were living there?
I was just a teacher
citizen?
in Yeshiva Reshit Yerushalayim and Tiferet and Machon Mayan, but it was just I was going to sleep at night and saying to myself, how can this be happening? How can it be that 2,000 years ago our temple was destroyed, we were exiled, not because of the strength of the Roman legions, but because we couldn't get along with each other. And here we are, we've returned after 2,000 years, and we can't get along with each other, and we're having these issues in the streets of Beit Shemesh. I couldn't sleep at night over it. So I became a community activist, trying to bridge the gaps at first, then kind of against the extremism. And thank God, we had success in quieting it down to a large degree.
How did the Haredi community absorb you? What was their impression of you?
Yeah, there was a significant gap between the public response and the private response. And there was a lot of public criticism of me. But then quietly, a lot of people were saying, please keep doing what you're doing because you're helping us tremendously.
Wow.
Both in terms of dealing with the extremists and then in my political approach, which was very much pro-army for everyone, pro-general studies for everyone. So there was a lot of public outcry. How could someone who learned in Eretz Israel, where, by the way, 80% or so go to college, but how could I be, in any way challenging the establishment here? But then quietly, even at a rabbinic level, there was a lot of support. So there was kind of this dichotomy that I was dealing with. Because even within the Haredi community, everyone recognizes that something has to change, that the poverty is so challenging, and that the average child can't sit and study Torah all day and night as their only pursuit, and they want to do other things. And now we live in a world where it's coming to them. They see the world, they want to be part of it. So why not offer opportunity? You can serve in the army by being in a religious unit. You can go to university and be in a program that's just for religious men. There's all kinds of ways to do it where we come to greet them. No one's trying to get anybody to change their way of life, just to give them opportunity. So I very much came with that mentality from my American upbringing and stayed very much with it, especially knowing, though, that I had this kind of quiet rabbinic support along the way. But that's an example of, we're trying to figure out, what does this state mean? How should it be? Army, this, that, the other, Shabbat, general studies, this is all part of, we're trying to find our way. And for me, it was just a tremendous blessing to be part of that process in any way.
Wow. How did you get into the Knesset?
So, when I was a community activist in Beit Shemesh, there were a few different parties that were sort of in touch with me about getting involved, becoming active. And I won't get into the names right now of who met with me, but I think they saw an American rabbi, moderate, but also committed, and they saw that there was perhaps an electorate that would support that. When I was looking into where to run, I actually went to the place that I wasn't the most comfortable. My natural political place is more in the right-wing elements, certainly on security issues. The name Yair Lapid was, I only heard negative things about him in my world. He's anti-this, anti-that. I ended up hearing him speak a few times, and even though I'm no longer a member of Yesh Atid, and I'm not here advocating for Yesh Atid, I'm here completely apolitical, there was something that pulled me, the idea of trying to work together with secular Israel. we can have secular parties and religious parties and just clash with each other for the next few decades. Let's see if there's an opportunity to try to break down those barriers and work together. And that was the message that Yair was projecting at the time. So I'll never forget my first, how did it even happen? I did some research online and found this email address, I don't know, lapidteam@gmail.com or something. In my very broken Hebrew at the time, wrote this email introducing myself. And I had this moment, which I think everybody has at different points in life. Should I go for it? Should I not do it? And I think human nature is often to shy away from it. And thank God pushed me to do it. And I sent the email. It led to a meeting with Yair a few weeks later. I was so nervous about the Hebrew. How am I going to get through this meeting with him? And to this day, he had no idea during that meeting if I was talking about past, present, or future. I was all over the place on the grammar. Masculine and feminine, there was no possibility of getting right.
Wow.
But we talked for about an hour, and it was very meaningful to sit and talk with a secular leader in Israel about the issues that matter, and where do we agree, where do we disagree, where can we work together. And that's what brought me ultimately to Yesh Atid. But getting elected to the Knesset was a whole other thing. That was just to become an activist for a movement that I believed religious and secular working together. Let's try to... he asked me if I would be number 17 on the party's list for Knesset. I accepted, but I said there's no chance that I'll be elected because there was a brand new party polling at about 5 or 6 seats at the time. I never once said vote for Yesh Atid so that I can be a member of Knesset. I always say there was one person in the world who believed that I would be elected, and that was my mom, who, get ready for this one, like a good Jewish mother, she made aliyah so she could vote for me in the election.
Oh my goodness.
One of the all-time best Jewish agency aliyah stories.
That's amazing.
She came to the Shliach in Washington. And they asked,
I would have done the same thing.
There you go. There you go. So she believed it was going to happen, but nobody else did. But there we were on election night, and out of nowhere, we won 19 seats. We're the second largest party in the Knesset. I remember looking at those screens as they announced the results, and the room was like spinning because I couldn't believe this was happening. But the words that came out of my mouth over and over again were Hodu LaHashem Ki Tov. Wow. Thank you, God, for your goodness, your blessing. I'm in the country 7-8 years, and now I have the opportunity not just to complain about what's happening in my country, but to roll up my sleeves every day and try to work to make it better. And it was an unbelievable gift that was given to me, and I'm thankful for the opportunity that I had to serve in the Knesset, both in terms of the things that I was able to accomplish as a member of Knesset, but also the platform that is given to me now for, God willing, the rest of my life to try to do good.
How did they accept you in the Knesset?
I was so nervous about that for two levels. One was Hebrew, and I'll get to that in a moment. And the other one was I didn't serve in the army. I'm in a room with a man who had the last feet on the ground in Entebbe, and I'm sitting there in the same room. Who am I? What am I?
That's right.
So on the second issue, they had such admiration for the fact that I made Aliyah. It was something which almost filled that void of, okay, I didn't serve in the army, but my goodness, I'll never forget, I was sitting in a committee next to Reuven Rivlin, who then became a president of Israel. He wasn't president then, he was just a member of Knesset. And I said to him, I heard that your family is 9 generations Jerusalem. Is that true? He said, yeah, they were students of the Vilna Gaon, sent in the 18th century. And I said to him, I'm so jealous of you. 9 generations Jerusalem. And he said to me, you're jealous of me? He said, I'm jealous of you. You chose Israel. You got to do what Avraham Avinu did and move to Israel. I didn't get that opportunity. I'm jealous of you. And over again, I saw this. I heard people saying, what a sacrifice you made. Everyone in Israel is thinking about going to live in America, and you moved here from America. So that, they accepted me because of that, because they saw the Aliyah itself as this great act of sacrifice. Hebrew, I was so nervous about. I'm a proud graduate of 12 years of Jewish day school education. I can ask how much does a falafel cost, but Knesset was a whole other level. So
I've seen you speak in Hebrew. You speak really well.
So that's post what I'm about to tell you.
Okay.
The Knesset gives every single Knesset member a budget to learn a second language. Most use it for English, some for Arabic, some Russian. I made history. I was the first sitting member of Knesset to use the budget to learn Hebrew.
That's hilarious.
And I had a tutor who came in, and he worked with me. He was a former army officer. This drill, I had homework every single night, and I worked really hard. I actually used the example to some degree of my grandmother. Imagining her coming to America in her 20s after the Holocaust, And by the end of her life, she was watching Jeopardy every night and doing the New York Times crossword puzzle. And I used that example.
You're so funny.
Yeah. And I said, maybe I can do this. And I worked really hard. It's still not the level of my English. It's my mother tongue, and it's obviously different. But I can speak without a fear of making any kind of a significant mistake. And that's really the hurdle you have to get over.
I want to ask you a question, if we can backtrack for a second, when you were saying that when you were meeting other Knesset members who were 9 generations and in Israel. You know, when a lot of the pro-Palestinian movement, they say that Jews, the native land of Jews is not Israel because they come from Europe. Right? That
Right.
their roots are in Europe or in other different countries. What's your response to that?
So to me, there's 2 responses to it. One is there was a continuous line of Jews here all the way through, even during the exile, and that can be documented and shown. So the idea that it was Judenrein, God forbid, that there was no Jews in Israel, that's not true. But all you have to do is, you don't want to believe the Bible, don't believe the Bible, that's fine. But study archaeology and you'll see the finds that we have. I wrote an article one time for Honest Reporting called, like, it's all in the coins. Right? Just look at the coins that have been found, and it's very clear that we had a very strong presence here, and this is our ancestral homeland. So the notion that because we used to live here and then we were exiled and we want to come back to our biblical ancestral homeland, that somehow we don't have the right to do so, is something which I reject out of hand. And I also don't understand. The whole world is filled with migrants, the people that move from one place to another. So if Jews choose to want to live in Israel, that's their right to live in Israel, just like someone from another country could try to live in New York. That's just the people's right to move. And this idea that somehow we can't be here because we weren't here continuously all the way through, it's just something which I reject out of hand. But I also take it to another place. And I challenge people about this Palestinian nation. And this is something, I've had these conversations in parliaments in Europe, on college campuses. That's a fabrication. It's something which was made up. There are people who are living here, everybody should have their rights, and that's fine. But there wasn't a nation of Palestinian Arabs that were living here that had any kind of a drive to have their own state, that had there was nothing. It was a bunch of people who were living here together, Jews and non-Jews, and they made it work until the non-Jews weren't happy with the Jews here. And that's the story. So it's not as if there was some other state that was here, some other nation that was here that has now been usurped. That's a story which Yasser Arafat came up with in the 1960s and has somehow taken hold throughout the world. But it's important for us to always go back to that place. I even challenge people, where does the name Palestinian come from? Right, first of all, we were all Palestinians that were living here. That's number one. And number two, it's something which came from the Romans, right? Because they wanted people to forget about Judea. That's the history behind where it came from. So it's just important to get back to that. I actually wrote a book called Fact Over Fiction because I felt it was so important. Let's put aside right wing, left wing, this, that, just talk about facts. And whenever people raise that question about where we came from, let's talk about the facts.
Do you believe that everybody in the government loves the country just as much?
So this is something which I really learned during my time in Knesset, and I try to tell people all the time. They do. I'm talking about now the Jewish members of the Knesset.
Yeah.
They might have a totally different approach regarding what Israel needs to survive and what's best for the Jewish people. But 99% really come to work every day because they want to make the country better. And they believe with such passion in what they're saying. And that's part of why you see the raised voices and the other shenanigans that go on.
Yeah, I can't watch the Knesset network or mostly the news because I just hear people yelling at each other.
Correct. Now, some of that is just theatrics for the cameras.
Okay.
You will literally have, it made me crazy as a member because, so we sit in the main chambers in the Malaya where you see the screaming and the yelling. Right behind that room, literally right behind that room, there's a room which the cameras don't see, where they have couches and sofas and they serve coffee and cake and vegetables. And you can literally have 2 members of Knesset at each other's throats in session. And then 5 minutes later, they're sitting on the couch, how the wife, how the kids.
Are you kidding me?
Best of friends. And I'm not exaggerating now.
Wow. Thank you for telling me that.
We're talking about from right wing to left wing, from religious to secular, and vice versa. You see that. You see the relationships. You see the friendships. So a lot of it is for the cameras. But having said that, when issues do come up, these are not existential threats that are thousands of miles away. We're talking about right here, right now, what are we going to do? And I do believe that the overwhelming majority of members of Knesset really have the best intentions in mind. They're not corrupt. They're trying to do what they believe is best for the country. And it just plays out really poorly in front of the cameras.
Yeah, it's hard to watch.
Yeah.
It's hard to watch. Do you think that we'll ever get along? All of us get along?
Get along. Let me say it this way. In the United States Congress, one time a person yelled out, "You lie," to the President of the United States during a State of the Union address, and it was a fiasco for months. This is his whole career. Just now, President Trump gave the State of the Union address, and for the first time ever, a member of Congress was asked to leave the room. But it's not the way it is in Israel, where it's one warning, two warning, three warning, ushers come, grab him, he's screaming, yelling. It was, will the gentleman please stand up and leave the chambers? That's America, this is Israel. I don't think that culture will ever change. I think it's a more European style parliament where everyone is very, very free and fluid and loose with some of the things that they say. I do hope that we can reach a point where we have better dialogue about the issues. In other words, okay, the religious camp is saying this, the secular camp is saying this. Let's sit down in a room and talk about it. Try to figure out where is there place for compromise. I can try to convince you of my side of it. To have a real conversation like that, there aren't enough of those. On security issues, more hawkish, more dovish. Let's talk about the issues instead of just screaming whatever we believe. That is less of a dialogue, and I do hope we get to a point where we have those conversations. We'll still have the disagreements, but let's disagree agreeably.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you one more question about the government, and then I want to leave that because that's not really the reason that you're here.
Sure.
But when I told some of my friends that I invited you to come, they said, he's a very controversial figure, right? And I'm not really into politics. I have to preface by saying that I'm more of a people person than a politics person. But what it is about you that was so controversial?
I think the decision to join Yesh Atid in particular was one which was really hard for people.
They feel like it was a bida?
What is a religious Orthodox rabbi doing together with someone who is extremely, extremely secular, and I mean in his lifestyle?
They think you have ulterior motives for that?
I don't know. I mean, I never was really confronted in that way. It was more a question of am I authentic in my religious side, or is there something that people are missing? People wanted to know. And whenever I had the opportunity to sit and talk with someone and explain to them why I made that decision and what it was all about, people get it. It's also difficult to see because without getting into the politics, the party is in a different place today than it was then. We joined the Netanyahu government. We were together. There was very specific goals that really spoke to me. But I don't see myself as a controversial person. I see myself as someone who wakes up every day and really asks myself, what can I do to make Israel better and to help people? I really believe that God has put me in a place where I can be helpful. I mean, just yesterday, literally yesterday, 2 families that weren't able to make Aliyah because of bureaucratic issues, they received their approvals to make Aliyah, and that's thanks to our incredible staff and support. But to have been put in a position where it can help Olim and help Israel and try to bring, even to the politics, a little bit of my American perspective of we can disagree but figure out a compromise. So I don't see it as controversial. I see it, and I never saw myself that way. And I've really been blessed to see so many people who have sat with me to hear, to understand the story, to really understand what I was thinking. They do have a different perspective, and the controversy kind of falls to the side.
Do you think that the Haredi perspective on Giyus has changed since October 7th, since the war started?
Yes. Let me go back 10 years ago to Operation Protective Edge when I was a member of Knesset. We had a group of like 40 young Haredim asked to meet with me. And as happened often with my meetings, I didn't want to do it publicly. It was at a park in Givat Shmuel at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Are you serious? Yeah. 1 o'clock, like clandestine?
Yeah. Yes, like that.
Okay.
And I went, and there they were, 40 young Hasidim, and they sat with me, and they said, we can't live with ourselves. Like, we're not really learning Torah all day and night, and young men are dying our age. We want to join the army. and we help them get to Haredi units and enlist in the army. There's a place where there's a guilt, there's a feeling of, I need to be doing something. And again, if there's a young man who's truly learning Torah, morning, afternoon, night, it's called Torato Umnato. It's their only pursuit. You won't see them sitting in a falafel place, you won't see them watching the Knesset. That is a service to the Jewish people, which if Yair Lapid was sitting here, he would say, let that be their service. But for those who aren't, it's a time to combine the two together. And because of the fact that there are more and more opportunities being presented to Haredim to be able to join the army in a way that's more comfortable to them, we'll see the numbers continue to grow. It's going to be very slow. It's not going to be...
Why? What's their resistance? Like everyone, I guess, who comes from the religious world understands the importance of learning Torah, right? But there comes a time when even you see from kids, okay, they might not be Haredi, but Dati Leumi or whatever, Torah living Jews who are very active in the army. What's holding them back?
Let's even go back for a minute. I'll strengthen your question for a moment and say that even if we just analyze halacha for a moment, milchemet mitzvah, when there's a war for the existence of the Jewish people in Israel, forget a Torah scholar. You take a woman from her chuppah, a bride, and she goes to be part of the war effort. So it's clear that there's an obligation that everyone... This goes back to the beginning of the state, even before that, when there was this battle against secular Zionism, where the secular leaders, who I revere for having founded the state, they did want to establish a Jewish state that was secular in nature, devoid of God, devoid of Torah, devoid of mitzvot, and the religious side fought against it. There were sort of two different approaches on the religious side. One was more the Rav Kook approach, which was, so let's get involved and influence the state, and the more Haredi approach, which was circle the wagons and not be part of it. They're still in that place of fighting that battle, and they haven't realized, a lot of in the Haredi community, that no one's trying to make them less religious, right? I agree that to send a Haredi boy to regular army without any kind of an infrastructure, they'll likely lose their religiosity. But now we have an entire Haredi brigade, the Chashmonaim, and it provides them with prayers every day, Torah study every day. They won't have female commanders, things that are important to their society. So little by little, that message is kind of entering into the mindset of the Haredi community. But if you ask why, it's still from this place which is false. It's just not reality on the ground of they want us to become less religious. And when it comes to that issue, that kind of riles everyone up and says, we won't be part of this. But as they're starting to see Haredim go to the army, they'll come back. They're still religious. They feel good about themselves. They've contributed to the state. They have job opportunities as a result of it. It's going to happen. So I tell people we're talking about 2-3 generations. It's not going to happen probably even in our lifetimes that we'll see whole-scale change. But change takes time. Change happens slowly. But the important step is that we're making that change. We just had the first Magad, battalion commander, Haredi, just came to the fore. That's amazing. As these things start to happen more and more, the society will change more and more. But while that change is happening, it's frustrating, it's painful, it rips the country apart, and it's not a simple situation, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Neturei Karta, the extreme. What are they all about? I know maybe you don't want to talk about it, so I'll give them any time. But
no, I don't mind.
I'm interested. It's
a
crazy situation.
I don't mind talking about it, but I do believe in any population you're going to have a small fringe of extremism, which isn't really relevant to the. It's relevant only because when I go speak somewhere, that's thrown in my face by the audience. They'll show me, but look at these religious Jews who believe X, Y, or Z. Or you go to AIPAC, you go to a place, and they're out there protesting with the Palestinian side. It's very hard to see that. But it really is not consequential at all in terms of where it comes from. Just to go backwards for a moment, is there's a piece in the quote in the Talmud which says that God made the Jewish people swear 3 oaths. And one of those oaths is, Lo ya'alu b'choma. We're not going to take Israel over by force. So there's this idea of when the time comes for us to return, God will bring us back, will naturally come.
Yeah.
But in 1917, with the Balfour Declaration, Rav Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, the author of the Or Sameach and the Meshech Chochmah, he said, that's it. There's no more issue of the oath anymore because the leader of the greatest empire in the world has now said that there's to be a Jewish homeland in Israel. There's no fear of the Shavuot. The Satmar community, and particularly the Satmar Rebbe of Yoel Teitelbaum, believe that the oath is still in place. And that's where it comes from. There's this completely but if you look at the rest of the Haredi world for a moment, the rest of the Haredi political establishment, over 76 years, they've changed quite a bit. Yeah. And they're now more a part of it. They're now more accepting of it. Even the positions that they take in government, we had a Haredi minister. Little by little, they are accepting it more and more. And I think that comes from a place of recognizing, let's be frank, there's never been an entity that supported more Torah study than the State of Israel. There's lots of money that goes towards Torah study. So how can you talk about Israel being, the czarist government, this, that, and the other, when they're clearly supporting so much Torah?
Listen, we're a democracy, and we have so many different kinds of people here. Nobody's going to be 100% happy.
Right. Right.
Like when my guest a few days ago said, who doesn't like democracy? The Haredim, the Chilonim, the Arabs. Nobody likes it because no one gets 100% what they want. And it's true. We have to find a way of getting along with each other and to live in this country.
Exactly. That's the whole idea of the parliamentary system, which doesn't always work so well. But the whole idea is that there is, many different groups that come together and they have to find a way. For me, it was very shocking. You get into the Knesset, you have your ideology, all the things that you're going to change, and then you realize, I can't do that, I'm in a coalition, I can't do that, coalition, can't do that. And you learn to celebrate the 10% that you can do instead of the 90% that you can't do, because that's just the way the system works.
Is it working? Is the system working?
Okay, so I'm going to say two things to answer that question.
Okay.
One is, we wake up every day, and there's garbage collection, and there are traffic lights, and I went to the Interior Ministry, and I got my new Tudat Zehut, and you get your passport, and there are supermarkets, and people are eating at restaurants. Every time I go to a restaurant, they're full. So people are living their lives, and the country is, quote unquote, functional on a day-to-day basis. That, I truly believe, is one of the greatest revelations of God in our world, because when you see the system behind the scenes, it's very broken. To get anything done is so complicated, but we have a system of laws, and it plays itself out. So I do believe that you see this revelation of God, and things are generally working as a country. As a political system, I think it's broken. If I could change one thing, it would be the political system. I would change it. I would make it more of an American-style system. Not because I'm from America and I'm beholden to America, but I do understand the wisdom of the Founding Fathers in separation of powers, checks and balances. It's just done regional representation. Right? When we had our issues in Beit Shemesh, I had no member of Knesset who was beholden to me at all. Right? So that whole notion of that element of democracy, we don't have. So I would change the system if I had the power to do so, because I don't believe the system really works as it is today. I'll say one more thing, which might be political, and this is where maybe I get controversial if I say my opinion about something. But, for example, right now there's a big to-do about the head of the Shabak and this and that, right? I grew up in America where a president comes into office and automatically appoints who he wants to head the CIA and the FBI and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So there's sort of this, the history in Israel where it doesn't happen that way, where the prime minister doesn't come in with his own people, whether it's right wing or left wing. But I actually think it would be healthier for the country if it was that way, that we changed it to more of the American system where, a president comes in, here it's the prime minister, and is able to bring people with him to run those organizations because they have to work together. Again, like I said, whether it's the right wing, I'm not talking about specifically Netanyahu right now. But yeah, the system in general is something which I believe should change. It's not my idea. Ben-Gurion wanted to do so at the end of the 1960s and left the Labor Party because they wouldn't change the system. He understood that 20 years into this country, we need to change the system. So the system doesn't really work, but the country works.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of living in Israel?
There's two elements to that. The one is, without a doubt, looking at my children, now my grandchildren, thank God, the Hebrew. They're talking Hebrew. They're Israelis where it just, every time I see it, it warms my heart. I have these 3-year-old grandchildren that can talk Hebrew, and they're surrounded by Judaism everywhere. So just, it's the family side for sure is part one. It's a whole different feel. What Purim is like here, just being surrounded by Hebrew and Judaism and Jewish culture. That's number one. So I just love that part of it. I remember those days of walking to Shul on Rosh Hashanah, and it's a regular weekday in the Washington area.
That's right.
Going to Shul on Pesach, and it's a regular day. Walking around in a costume on Purim, and you look like a crazy person. I remember those days. And to just be home, in terms of that element.
Also, we had 2 days of Yom Tov, now we only have one.
That's right. That's right.
Another aspect.
So that's the first thing. But the second thing is definitely to know that I'm in the place of Jewish destiny, of Jewish history. We've traveled the ocean. We've done it. My family, thank God, is here. And to know that I'm in a place where we have our army and my family as part of that, but that we take care of ourselves. We have self-determination with God's help, and our own army and our own place. But we're in the place of Jewish destiny, and that I feel that every single day. I feel that I'm part of that process. And
100%.
Here I am, little me, and it's little everybody. Anybody who makes Aliyah can be part of that. That we play a role, no matter what you're doing professionally. You can be part of that. That's the second part. So it's Judaism, home, and also Judaism, our destiny, and where we are historically.
What's your most disliked thing about living here?
Besides
the government.
Right. So even
Sorry.
Sure. The boxes that people put themselves in. Like people ask me, "What are you?" Right? I'm a Jew. Nice. And there's elements of me that are more Haredi, there's elements of me that are more religious Zionist, there are elements of me that are more culturally Jewish. There's all different elements to every person. The having to box ourselves in is something which I don't like, and the more that I can do to break down those barriers, that people don't have to identify themselves that way, because I think that it pulls us away from one another. I don't have a doubt in my mind that what God is waiting for is that achdut, that unity. Unity doesn't mean achidut. It doesn't mean that we're all exactly the same. It just means that we can love one another and embrace one another, even when we disagree, and to accept other people for how they are. We don't have to be exactly like each other, like we talked about before with the tribes. But that having to put ourselves into a certain category is what I really don't like in Israel. Parenthetically, also smoking and things like that, but that's a whole other discussion. But I believe that we're on the right path on that front. I believe that we're talking about it. There's organizations that are working on it. People know that achdut is important. That's the first step, is to know what we have to get to, and then hopefully get towards that point. But that's something which it's what brought me into politics to begin with, and it's the number one issue that bothers me, on a daily basis.
Yeah. What do you tell people who are interested in making Aliyah but are worried about the conflict that we have in the country?
Yeah, so I say a few things. First of all, if people are talking about military conflict and that element, so that's everywhere. Unfortunately, I don't believe that terrorism has borders, and that's number one. I think that things happen everywhere, unfortunately. Anti-Semitism is rearing its ugly head everywhere. And I'd rather be home when those things are happening than away from home.
100%.
I'd rather be home. I'd rather be in a country where I walk around than to see everyone with guns because they'll use them for the right reasons and not for the wrong reasons. So that's my answer to that question. I just don't believe. And by the way, I have unbelievable admiration for lone soldiers and their families who are not living here, and yet their kids come here and serve here. It's unbelievable. And lone Banot Shirut as well. That's an unbelievable thing that you don't have the obligation, but you're doing it anyway. But to be here, I'd rather be here than anywhere else, even in the most difficult of times. In terms of the internal turmoil, first of all, the politics all around the world is not exactly
you're right.
kind.
Yeah.
I see the way the conversations go outside of Israel in every country as well. But my answer to people is, so come here and be part of the solution. Come here and have your voice and vote and get involved on a local level, get involved on your synagogue level, get involved on a school level, get involved on your local regional council level. But you can do that. You can come here and be part of the process. So instead of staying far away and saying, wow, that looks really complex, it's to say, okay, let's jump in and try to do something about that complexity. And I feel that every single person, no matter what their strengths are, no matter what their background is, no matter where they're coming from, has a role to play in Israel. And I'll go further, and Israel needs you. Israel needs them. We need the Jewish people to come home and to be here and be part of the process and influence it. By the way, I tell people all the time, especially in North America, if 1 million North Americans picked up and moved to Israel, Israel's political scene would be very, very different very, very quickly. So we need those numbers and come and be part of it. And like I said before, then you're now an actor on the scene of Jewish destiny. And what more can a person want than that?
I agree with that. And even further, I think on a cultural level, if 1 million North American Jews came here, they would saturate society with American values or North American values, whatever, and the landscape would look different.
Absolutely, 100%.
You know, like when people say to me, I don't want to come because it's too much of a cultural difference, how am I ever going to get acclimated? And I say to them, it's like when you come to Israel, you're bringing yourself, your belief, your culture here.
Right.
And it's like Israel doesn't have to swallow you up. Right. You could be an influence on what happens here.
Absolutely.
Make Israel yours.
Absolutely. And let's just take it one step further. You don't have to be a scholar of history to know that at some point, wherever people are living, they're going to have to leave from there. At some point, something's going to happen. And you know, we like to do anything for our children, so do this for our children. Right? Yes, it's difficult and it's challenging, and I do not in any way deny that. But now it won't be difficult for your children,
exactly.
Or it won't be difficult for your great-grandchildren, or maybe it's going to be your great-great-grandchildren, because they'll be here and you've made that sacrifice for them. What more do we want as parents than to do that?
Yeah. Tell me how you started Yad L'Olim.
So Yad L'Olim really, so when I was elected to the Knesset, they announced in all the English media that I was the first American-born Knesset member in 30 years. That led to
Who was the one before you?
Meir Kahana.
Okay. Oh, yay, Meir Kahana.
So I used
like
to,
him.
yeah. I actually have the honor, I daven every single morning. His brother prays in the same synagogue.
Really?
Every Rabbi Nachman Kahana, yeah. He's a real big Talmudic scholar and has a lot of fascinating insights.
Cool.
And I get to see him and receive Birchat Kohanim from him. When he,
You think he would come on my show?
I could ask him for you.
Could you ask him?
I could ask him for you.
Oh my God, I'm not only a fan of, I'm not such a fan, it's not like I completely agree with his ideology, but I think he was such a forward thinker, that he's such an influence.
And going back to...
Sorry for interrupting
No, and going back to the question you asked way in the beginning, whatever he believed in, it was because of love of the Jewish people in Israel. So that's where the demonizing of people when they're saying what they believe. And I'm saying this on both sides. I say this on both sides. I can disagree with people about many different things, but I can respect that they're saying things because they believe this is the best for Israel and the Jewish people. So I forgot what I was answering. I'm sorry.
You were saying about how you were davening with Rav Kahana's
right. I don't remember how I got to Meir Kahana.
And you were saying that he's a big scholar. And
Aliyah, Yad L'Olim. How we started Yad L'Olim. Okay, right.
Sorry.
That's okay. So what happened was Olim in the tens of thousands started messaging my office for they wanted help with different bureaucratic issues because I was like the congressman now for all the English-speaking Olim in Israel, which is about 300,000 people. So we even had
it's 300,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
We even had open hours in the Knesset every Sunday from like 9 to 4 where people could sign up and meet with me and my staff for 10, 15 minutes to whatever their issues were. Sometimes it was just therapy, but
wow.
And we were full. We were full all the time. I took that very seriously. When I left Yad L'Olim, when I left the Knesset in 2015, every day I'd get a handful of Olim ask me for help, and voluntarily I helped them. I knew the ministers, I knew how things worked. And then COVID hit, and people started asking me for help to get their families permits to enter Israel for a wedding, for a bris, and thank God I was able to help them, and word spread. And I'll jump to the end of the story. By May 2021, I was getting more than 700 requests a day.
Wow.
To email, WhatsApp, Facebook, and just trying to juggle all that. So I thought I was going to start, just to help me with that, I would raise a little bit of money, have an assistant, have a website, And the accountant that I met with said, but you've been helping Olim for 10 years, like why not broaden it? So we called it Yad L'Olim, and we said we're here to help Jews from all around the world with any bureaucratic issues. In other words, they need help with bureaucracy related to the government on their Aliyah process, or once they get here, we're here to help. And thank God, I look back now at almost 4 years, close to 45,000 Olim from 40 countries have been in touch asking for help. And it's just the most incredible thing. We have a staff, we have intake on the email, via the website, and throughout the day, we're helping people navigate health ministry, education ministry, tax issues, interior ministry issues, and just making Aliyah easier for people, both in terms of getting here and settling here.
Is it still difficult? Is there still challenging?
Yeah, there are challenges, and there's a lot of times, for example, that documents are being asked for that people can't produce, so we'll advocate for them on that issue. There's still certainly questions about people's Jewish backgrounds, so we'll get involved.
Oh, really?
We'll get involved in that as well. Certainly, people move here, navigating the health system. The second most popular group of Olim right now is people who are retirees. Who are not retiring to Florida anymore, they're coming to Israel, which is great. But how do they get an appointment? Or if they have to go through prolonged treatments. So we'll hold their hand literally through the whole process and be there for them. Getting special needs children into the right schools when people make Aliyah. That's something
I have a friend here who just made Aliyah 6 months ago, and she's having the hardest time. She has a child with special needs.
So she should be, literally, that's the kind of example. She should be in touch with Yad L'Olim, and we'll do everything we can.
Yeah.
We work with the education ministry to make sure that every single child is placed in a school. And these are things that will literally make or break Aliyah for people. If their children don't have education, if they don't have health services, you can't live in the country.
It's a huge mitzvah.
So thank God we're able to do that every day to really know that we're helping people. And we also do government relations. We have our legislative agenda, not for any political party, which is what I love about it, but it's for Olim. All Olim will benefit from this change in policy. So we go to the Knesset, we go to the committees, we work with the ministers, and we try to change policies to help Olim and Aliyah as well.
How is it received?
Very well. Aliyah, everybody wants to try to help Olim. It's in their best interest. There are times that there are budgetary issues, and this is a country which spends more on defense than any country in the world, in terms of the percentage of the budget. We don't have a lot of free money available to throw around, so it's complicated, but in terms of how it's received very well. And for me, that's what I love about where I am today. I'm not in politics, but I'm in the Knesset. I can meet with coalition, opposition, talk with everybody. I have no political agenda. I'm not asking anybody for their vote. I can just work to help Olim. And for me, to sit in a committee and know that I'm representing the Olim, it's the greatest honor.
What's the difference between your organization and other organizations that are similar?
So some of the larger organizations, for example, Nefesh B'Nefesh is North America exclusively, and their primary mandate is to bring people, Olim, to Israel. They do amazing work in doing that, and they have great services for afterwards. But sort of when it gets to the nitty-gritty of the bureaucracy, once they're here, people will definitely turn to us for that. But then beyond North America, there's an average, let's say, of 40,000 Olim per year. So there's 35,000 Olim plus that don't have the benefit of that organization. But there are other countries that have great organizations as well. For the French, there's Kalita, which helps especially with employment. For Olim from South Africa and Australia, there's Telfed. We work together with them. For some of the Spanish speakers, there's Ole. So there are great organizations out there. My goal was never to try to do what anybody else is doing, but to try to fill the void where we could help. And specifically that niche of the government side. Because of my government history and my connections that I have with the current MKs and the ministers and their staffs to be able to help navigate the complicated bureaucratic issues, that's really where we found our niche, and thank God we've been able to help tens of thousands of Olim.
That's incredible. It shouldn't be a reason why people don't come here because of that.
Correct. That's really my goal. My goal is that anyone who's coming here has someone to hold their hand, to answer their call, to answer their email, to be there with them all the way through, to be there with them afterwards. And it's not just for new Olim. We can have somebody who's living here for many years, and now all of a sudden there's an issue with their child, or an issue with health, an issue with the taxes, an issue with whatever it is, to try to be here to help people on whatever issue comes up, to be able to be here to help guide them and navigate the system.
Let's talk a little bit about the war and your advocacy work. Tell me where that started from. Did it start when you were already in the Knesset, or did it did it get more?
So the Israel, right, great question. The Israel advocacy started in the Knesset because what happened was the Knesset said, wait a minute, we have a member of Knesset who speaks English as a mother tongue. So they had me speak to all these delegations that would come to Israel, go to travel to parliaments around the world and speak for Israel. So I really began working in that space during that period of time. When the war started, at first, I wasn't sure what role I would have to play, either me privately or as Yad L'Olim. But very quickly, the phone calls started coming. Sadly, tragically, our son was killed. We need help burying him in this cemetery. Can you help us with that? Our son was killed. They don't know where his body is right now. Can you help us navigate with that? All the difficult, it was very difficult. It was a very difficult beginning of the war, very dark for me. And I said to myself, if I'm going to survive, forget anybody else, I need to focus on positive. I need to bring some light into my life. I was waking up in the morning, I didn't want to see my phone. I just didn't want to see what's facing me. This is
what I did.
Okay, there you go.
This is what I did with the war.
Taking it to that kind of a place. So I said, every day I'll try to find a story or two and post it. And it just exploded in the most incredible of ways on social media, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, where to the point where there are some days where if by 8 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast of America I haven't posted something, someone will say, when's your post going to come? Because people were hanging on to it that much.
Yeah.
I started getting invited to speak overseas to tell these stories. And then someone came over to me in Miami on one Shabbat and said, you have to write a book. You have to write a book because people are thirsty for positivity.
Yes.
So thank God the book has come out. It's called The Magic and the Tragic. And it's been very well received. It has a letter of blessing from the President of Israel, but also an introduction from an amazing woman named Iris Chaim. Iris Chaim's son Yotam was a red-haired boy who was taken from Kfar Aza, hostage, and escaped Hamas captivity. And in the fog of war was killed by IDF soldiers. And she took the most horrific tragedy imaginable and just turned it into the most incredible light in terms of how she spoke to the soldiers who killed her son by accident and just in general her positivity. It's all in the book, and I've spent time with her. Just amazing people that this country is filled with, both soldiers, their families, the hostages, their families, regular people, quote unquote, on the street. And it became a passion of mine since October 7th to every day focus on that positivity. And that's my mode of hasbara. Here and there, I'll enter into some of the anti-Israel fray. But for the most part, I think if the line wasn't drawn on October 7th and you're not with us, nothing that I say is going to sway you after that. But to try to fill our people and supporters of Israel with light and positivity and spirituality, that's really the role that I've tried to take since October 7th.
Isn't it amazing? Aren't the people here just incredible?
The stories, I'm sure you've had this experience as well, but you go to a funeral, you go to a Shiva house, and we're so broken as people, and the families themselves lift us up. 100%. The way they speak and the letters that soldiers left behind, and just has been such inspiration. Or just a country where there's a bunch of soldiers in a restaurant and they finished eating and all of a sudden they find out their bill was paid for from some random person who saw them there. Just an amazing, amazing country. And it's a country filled with the most incredible, incredible people. And I get daily strength from looking into those stories and posting them.
Me too. I get daily strength from being here and being surrounded by that kind of resilience. It's something that I think in my life, especially in North America, it was lacking. You don't see that kind of that connection, that will to move on. I mean, last night we were in this room, we were in the bomb shelter, right? And it's like you walk out and then you continue on with your sleep or your day or whatever. You just get up and the time keeps going and you keep moving.
Correct. And we even move even stronger. Like the Torah says in the beginning of Shemot, that when Pharaoh, the more he smote us, the stronger we became. And that's literally what we see here as well.
100%, exactly. It's so true. So tell me a little bit more about the advocacy work that you're doing. I want to know, are you more focused on Israel or what's going on in North America in terms of the anti-Semitism?
More in Israel. I really feel that Israel is my home. Israel, I care about what's happening all around the world, but anything that I can do to make the case for Israel, to share the truth about Israel, to share what's special about Israel, that's really where I see myself. I certainly keep my eyes on the news and pray, regularly for our brothers and sisters all around the world, and it's very hard to see what's happening. But yeah, I'm very much Israel focused. Even when in my capacity as a member of Knesset, or even since when I'm in political meetings, it's really all Israel focused. That's really where I see myself.
I feel like, I've said this a few times before, that Israel is the microcosm of the rest of the Jewish world, and whatever happens in Israel explodes out into the world. And in order to fix the issues outside, we have to fix the issues here.
That's for sure. I definitely think that you've touched on something really important. And I do want to say, because I think it's important, especially post-October 7th, we saw diaspora Jewry really rising to the fore and doing unbelievable things, both in terms of financial support and all the hundreds of thousands of duffel bags that came flowing into Israel, and the prayers and the lobbying that they're doing outside of Israel. It's something which I don't want to overlook, and I offer our thanks for all of those efforts. But I do believe that Israel is the heart and soul of the Jewish people, and I do believe that Jews outside of Israel get strength from how we're doing here as well.
For sure. That's 100% true.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself Israeli-American or American-Israeli?
So first of all, I'm not American anymore. In order to serve,
you gave up your citizenship?
I had to. Israeli law required me to give up to renounce. I had to stand in the U.S. Embassy and raise my right hand and renounce my American citizenship.
Why?
It's Israeli law to serve in the Knesset. You can't hold citizenship in another country.
Wow.
Yeah, so I have my American passport with a big hole in it.
Was that hard for you to do?
So it wasn't a hard decision to make to do it. It was emotional to do it. Yeah, I come from a very patriotic American family. I grew up every single morning in elementary school. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Wow. And the American flag flew outside our home all year round in Silver Spring. And there I was renouncing my citizenship. I actually choked up as I was saying it. There's a clerk, and you say it and she gave me some time, and she said she'll help me through it, because I was really very emotional doing it. I felt like what we call a kafui tov, an ingrate, because America did give my family a really tremendous amount, and I didn't want to feel like I was somehow rejecting that. But I'll tell you an amazing story that happened. So afterwards, I met with the ambassador. Dan Shapiro was the ambassador at the time, and I told him I feel so guilty, and I wrote this letter. Thank you, America. And he said, what should I do with it? I said, I don't know, next time you see President Obama, you can give him my letter. Somehow it got around, and I actually did an interview on Fox News about my letter, thanking America. I thought that was very important, to stand up and thank America for the opportunities that it gave us. And I said I wasn't moving away from something, I was moving to something, but moving to Israel. But here I am, and I'm fully Israeli, with no official ties to any country. If you're asking me culturally, where do I see?
But do you still celebrate Thanksgiving?
I wasn't the football games. The football game.
Okay.
The football games. I'll definitely pay attention to.
I never understood that.
Yeah, that's a whole other. It wasn't. We did used to have Thanksgiving dinner as a family with the turkey and the cranberry sauce and everything, and watch the football. I'll say this: there's no doubt that culturally, I'm still very American. I'm still the person who walks down the street and sees people and says, "Good morning, how are you?" Now, again, even if Israel, it's not the case, what I've learned is that same Israeli who doesn't say, "Good morning, how are you?" Will take a bullet for me, if God forbid they have to. So, the feelings run very deep in a very beautiful way, without sort of the complimentaries in the beginning of it. But I think in English, I dream in English, I have an American mentality, certainly. But
what aspect of you has become Israeli?
I'm willing to speak my mind a little bit more. A little bit more chutzpah. Yeah. I will tell people if I feel that they're doing the wrong thing more than I would have done in the past. Even in driving, but
it always comes
right. It's the driving, but it's the reverse. I'll never become a honker of my horn, but if somebody honks the horn When I don't think they should, I will
Honk back?
Not honk back. I was like, what was that about? Like, why are you honking the horn? So that's kind of where I have that. But more American in terms of kind of like a little bit slower pace type of personality. But yeah, the ability to speak up, and I learned that in the Knesset also. In the Knesset, they told me, Dov, you got to scream, you got to pound the table, you got to learn how to do that. People want to see that you're passionate about the issues, and I get that.
Nice, that's good. One more final question that I want to ask you, a little bit about President Trump and his influence on the war here in Israel. It seems that a lot of decisions that we've made here have been based on permissions that we were allowed to from United States. Do you think that Israel will ever be independent? Or we can be independent?
So I'm going to answer your question on two levels, because it's very easy for me to sit here and say, don't worry what anybody else says, don't worry about America, don't do this, but I'm not in the room facing the consequences of ammunition that we're not getting, whatever else it is. So I say it all the time, right? We shouldn't worry and care about it. But I also respect the fact that I'm not in that room right now with the consequences on my shoulders for what that means. And I understand that if there is some way to navigate things so that we can have American support, I understand the benefits of that. That's part one. But part two, I do believe that if we ultimately are a country of faith and a country that believes that we're here in God's grace, and we've won the wars, of course, because of our incredible soldiers and the like, but with God's blessing, then we have to do what we have to do and have faith that things will work out. For that to happen, you'll have to have a leader who is a person of faith. I'm talking about faith, not religious faith. I'm not getting into the nuances of people's religious practice.
An Israeli leader or an American leader?
I'm talking about an Israeli leader.
Okay.
I'm talking about an Israeli leader who has emunah and has bitachon. And again, I'm not suggesting that it's an easy thing for someone to eventually do, but to recognize that ultimately we can't hurt ourselves in order to placate some other country. That's really what it comes down to. There has been a change in terms of that. We do have more freedom, so to speak, to do what we want to do vis-a-vis the current American administration.
We do?
Yeah, we definitely do. Secretary of State Rubio, I can't wait for Ambassador Huckabee, who I've had the pleasure to spend time with, to come, because he's coming from a faith-based perspective. And we do. Even without getting into the nuances of what's happening right now, I do believe that we have the freedom now to decide to do whatever we feel is the right thing to do on multiple fronts, not just talking to Gaza, but also in terms of Iran and in terms of, and that's a place that Israel needs to be in. But I'm talking about going beyond the geopolitical side of it and talking more on the spiritual side of it. We are destined to be an Am Levadad Yishkon, where we're alone, and I think that when we do what we feel we need to do, Hashem oz la'amo yitain. God gives strength to His nation, and then Hashem yavrechat amo b'shalom, and then God blesses us with peace. And we have to be people of strength who do what we need to do in order to protect ourselves, and then ultimately, I do believe that we can be showered with blessing from above as well.
Amen, amen. I believe that out of the worst tragedies comes the biggest Yeshua. And you see that from the Holocaust, that Israel was formed afterwards. And I think that if we can believe that the tragedy that happened here on October 7th will bring Yeshua for Am Yisrael here, but also all over the world, I think that would be the best thing.
Absolutely.
And I'm hoping that will happen. I'm putting my words out there to manifest that for us.
For sure. And the words have meaning. Words take hold. And I think our history has shown that every time we've suffered terribly, and again, we don't understand the ins and outs of all the individual and collective suffering that takes place, but it does bring us forward in the process. And that's certainly, hopefully we'll be able to look back and say, oh, now we understand what role that played in the final redemption.
We're in a very important part of history right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, it is. It's exciting. And that goes back to our point about how exciting it is to be here.
Yes.
And a player as that's happening.
Yeah. Is there anything that you want to promote to the listeners here something that you're working on, something for the future?
I think just to continue the theme of what we were just talking about right now, to take a step back and recognize the blessing that we have to be living in these times. You know, I had an opportunity to walk in the old city of Jerusalem with a famous baseball player named Mariano Rivera, who's one of the best pitchers in baseball history. And he says to me, Dov, I feel God everywhere.
Wow.
I can't believe I'm walking where Abraham walked. I can't believe I'm walking where King David walked. And, you know, I say we have to awaken our inner Mariano, right? We take it for granted. Oh, there's an Israel. Oh, there's Jerusalem. He's Christian. Yeah. Oh, there's Israel. Oh, there's Jerusalem. And we are blessed to live in the most incredible of times. And what we have to have is thanks to God for that. And there's when God gives us this kind of blessing, to have thanks, but not just thanks in word, but also in deed. For those who are blessed to make aliyah, and I use that word very, very deliberately because it's the greatest blessing, to make aliyah, and make Israel your home and the home for your family in the future. And if you need any help along the way, Yad L'Olim will be there for you. If you can't make aliyah right now for some reason, raise your children to make aliyah, and then join them. Retirement in Israel is fantastic. To come here, to serve here, to support, to be advocates. But it can't just be business as usual. This is my constant message, is that when you're living in times, magnificent times like we're blessed to live, it just can't be business as usual. We have to wake up every day, and every person has to ask themselves, what can I do for Israel, the Jewish people, and God today? And I think if all of us do that collectively, hopefully that can take us over the finish line from the messianic times that we're living in and bring us to the time of the final redemption.
It was so amazing sitting here with you. You're such a positive person and so inspirational. And I know that for my listeners, it'll be like a positive experience as well. Thank you so much for all that you do for Am Yisrael, for the Olim, for everyone. And I just wish you tremendous success in the future.
Oh, man, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my biggest pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Dayna Show. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to the podcast, like and share with your friends on social media, and rate us 5 stars. Don't forget to tune in next week, and we'll see you then.